As trade developed inside the European Union, more regulation on the common market was introduced, and the equal terms provided by ICAO became insufficient. The European Commission addressed the increased demand for standardization by developing EU provisions, especially for the aviation sector. The EU Commission, being a political entity, have constructed an organization to address aviation matters. This organization is known as the European Aviation Safety Agency, sometimes called EASA. EASA operates under the authority of the EU Commission, which regulates European aviation by submitting tasks to EASA, who in return advises the Commission on how the task is suggested solved. The EU Commission then publishes provisions known as implementing rules that are binding in all EU member states in the form it is published. States no longer have the freedom to choose a degree of adherence as with the ICAO standards and recommended practices, though some areas are governed by directives, which gives a little more freedom, but that's beside the point for now. In addition to implementing rules issued by the Commission, EASA itself publishes documents called Acceptable Means of Compliance and Guidance Material. Acceptable means of compliance are procedures and requirements that, if followed, will ensure compliance with the implementing rule. The acceptable means of compliance are considered as binding rules, but they're only binding if no other means of compliance are available. Other means of compliance may become available if someone develops a different method that provides compliance with the implementing rule without degrading the level of safety. Operators as well as national authorities may develop these different methods that are called alternative means of compliance. Because acceptable means of compliance are optional, if alternative means of compliance exists, you'll see that the word should is used in means of compliance, where the word shall is used in the implementing rule, denoting that no alternative exists. Lastly, EASA publishes guidance material providing information on interpretation of the implementing rule. These are non-binding, meaning that they in themselves are not rules, but specifies how a rule is to be understood. Most of the EU regulation is developed on the basis of ICAO standards and recommended practices that are then revised to suit European needs. Because of the way the EU is constructed, the EU Commission and EASA have only legislative powers. They have no executive powers such as police or other physical presence. Instead, the Commission relies on the National Aviation Authority that previously was installed by governments to fulfill requirements towards ICAO. The principle applies that regulation issued by the EU always goes before any national provision. Some European countries have chosen to let private entities solve the task, and the term National Aviation Authority is therefore replaced by the term Competent Authority to signify that the authority may not be part of the political government. So, national authorities are no longer entitled to issue regulations on topics that are already regulated by EU, but in other matters they play the exact same role as prior to EU regulation, ensuring that aviation operations are executed in accordance with provisions. Recreational flying was not regulated by the EU until 2011, and you may find that national rules still are active. However, ideally such rules will be cancelled as authorities finalizes the process of implementing EU regulations. A key feature in regulating the aviation sector is to prevent accidents. From early on in the post-war years, official investigations of aviation accidents have taken place. Initially, the purpose was to let survivors know what caused their misfortune. But as accident rates rose with the rise in aviation usage, investigations focused on spreading knowledge of accident causes to prevent others from encountering the same problems. Generally, the accident investigation units operate independent of aviation authorities, but they are, of course, funded by the same political government. They are meant to put forward findings and recommend to the authority areas where it believes that regulation could have prevented an accident. All this is based on that the Accident Investigation Unit is notified of occurrences, and pilots are therefore legally obligated to report to the Accident Investigation Unit as soon as possible if certain situation arises. The Accident Investigation Unit operates with two levels of occurrences: accidents and serious incidents. Occurrences qualify as an accident if someone has sustained serious injury, or, what is worse, or an aircraft has sustained structural damage or needs major repair, or something worse. Occurrences that qualify as a serious incident are not exhaustively defined, but they can be generalized as an occurrence that nearly became an accident and where only luck prevented the escalation. Also, here are some examples of serious incidents defined by ICAO. The notion of using other people's bad experience has also been adopted by the EU Commission. Since the beginning of the millennium, an additional reporting obligation has been put on aviation personnel to report every time a flight is not carried out as intended, but not due to accidents or serious incidents. This system is called flight safety reporting or air traffic incident reporting, and the general idea is to learn the cause of as to why persons commit errors. The system calls for the term just culture, meaning that as long as you report, you'll not be punished for committing an error, unless it is due to gross negligence. The authority uses these inputs to identify trends and will act on trends by changing factors which play a significant role in causing non-normal situations. Normally, the flight safety report shall be submitted to the competent authority, not the Accident Investigation Unit, within 72 hours of the occurrence. That's what you need to know regarding the organizations involved in regulating aviation, and perhaps a little bit more. Let's summarize the key points. ICAO have created the framework for aviation regulation. You're allowed to fly to and from any United Nations member state on your PPL. EU regulations are, in general, ICAO compliant, the light aircraft pilot license being one exception. EU regulation applies equally to all EU member states. The competent authority executes the powers of the EU Commission, and if you encounter something not normal during a flight, you should report it.